Hello, everyone, to another episode of Gupshup with Gil. Today, I have someone with me who's I can safely say is one of my friends, and people actually say कि social media पे आपको ज़्यादा friends नहीं मिलते. It's something where you should not be expecting too much out of people, but it this is one good scenario or one good coincidence where I found someone who I relate a lot with. It also helps that both of us come from the same city, so we have a few similar connections. Uh, it wouldn't be fair for me to give an introduction for him, considering he's my friend, so I might not be very professional about it. So I'll leave the floor open for him to introduce himself. I have with me Himanesh Ganju, who's written a few pieces for Cricinfo. He's a researcher, but like I said, I'll leave it to Himanesh to complete his introduction. Himanesh, go ahead.
Thanks, Gurkeerat. Thanks so much for calling me. I remember we talked about this before you started, and you talked to me then about this. So I'm so glad to be here today. So yeah, I'm Himanesh. I'm a graduate student, PhD student in the US. I work on astrophysics, specifically cosmology, and I write a few pieces for Cricinfo now and then. I contribute to Cricinfo now and then.
Yeah, before his
and
PhD,
I'm yeah.
yeah,
Sorry, go on.
go ahead. I was saying that before your PhD, you've also done engineering from BITS Pilani in India.
Yeah.
And those who've done engineering in India would know that it's one of the reputed institutes. But I don't think Himanesh agrees because he spent time at there.
It's okay. I have my problems with that place, but it's fine. Like, लोगों को नाम पता है तो ठीक है मतलब. Yeah, so I did my engineering from BITS. Then I took a year off. Then I did my master's from JNU in physics, and now I'm doing a PhD, and I'm my third year now. Yeah, and apart from cricket, I'm a fan of Delhi food, Delhi history, and I'm a fan of music. For the past about 8 years, I've listened to only Coke Studio almost since I found it. But yeah, I used to sing once upon a time in school, but that's a long time ago. But yeah, so that's me. Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, it's quite diverse, which is why I said that it wouldn't be fair if I do an introduction, because there's an engineering background. There's quite a lot of interest for cricket for sure. There's a historical connection with Delhi, and now he's into completing his PhD in astrophysics. So we have someone who's I'd say is close to Jared Kimber in the terms of things he's done or he tends to do. But I think even Himanesh should agree that there's some time still till he reaches Jared.
Yeah, I think it's not fair to compare Jared to anyone because he's done a lot of work. He's done a lot of work before a lot of people, and he's just an encyclopedia at this point of cricket.
Would it be fair to say that you are a part of Jared Kimber fan club?
I am. So a lot of the people who started writing cricket blogs, right, including myself, we started by reading Jared's articles. And he was a kind of an inspiration for us in the sense that you can be a non-journalist who can break into this. And I remember I used to write on Reddit earlier, and I talked to Jared about it. And he gave me a lot of good advice then. This was like 5 years ago. So yeah, definitely Jared Kimber fan club, right?
Yeah, the one thing that I love about Jared the most is that like there's a quote by Harsha Bhogle which says that excellence isn't insecure, and I think Jared is an example of that. I know a lot of people who reach out to him on Twitter, ask him to come for a podcast, ask him to come for an analysis, send their articles, and he's always very interactive with people, and he always has something for everyone to learn from. So yeah, I think
absolutely,
cricket community as a whole, especially the fan community, owes a lot to Jared, not in terms of the writing that he does and educates all of us, but he also gives a lot of us a belief that okay, you can do it too.
Right, exactly. And he's overall a very nice person. And then when you have such a body of work, you're automatically like looked up to. So yeah.
Now, I want to know from you what are your most early memories of cricket. Living in Delhi. I want to know how was it from you? Like, I mean, I can also, I'm sure we will have some similar memories, but I want to know how was it for you growing up in Delhi and then, following the sport? What are the most early
Yeah,
memories?
so watching cricket was always there, right? If you live in any sort of upper middle class family in India, like cricket is always around there. But we used to play a lot of cricket, and not formally, but play a lot of cricket. Like everywhere, anywhere we could find a little bit of space, we played a lot of cricket.
Kalli
And
Mahalla.
I started गली मोहल्ला स्कूल के पीछे स्कूल के बाद स्कूल की ब्रेक में like wherever you could find any space and a ball you'd see us playing cricket. So we played a lot of cricket, and I started seriously watching it I think when I was I must have been 10 years old, and this was 2002 Champions Trophy was the first sort of major thing I watched, and I've been watching since. And then your relationship sort of just starts growing with it, right? Because when I went to college, reading about cricket and watching cricket was a kind of an escape for me. And I thought during those times, which are jobless times for us, I became a more discerning viewer of cricket. And it was then when I started following Anant Narayanan's articles, and I used to keep commenting on his articles and trying to get in touch with him. And that's where it began for me, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, pretty similar.
As a writer, yeah.
Yeah, pretty similar for me. It's
Yeah.
just that I was 7 and I started in 2003. But yeah,
Right.
early memories are quite similar, I think, for a lot of us who were from the late 90s generation. But
Right.
you know, I've been to Kotla quite a lot. You've been to Kotla quite a lot, but you
Right.
are one of those few people who look forward to watching a match in Kotla. How do you explain that? Because let's face it,
I mean,
all of us who've been to most Indian stadiums know that the
right.
facilities aren't the greatest, and Kotla is probably even it's not nice thing to say, but it's not better than average. It's probably worse than average. So
I mean, you have to keep your expectations in check, right? When I go to an Indian ground to watch a match, I don't expect comfort. I'm there to watch the cricket. I would like it, you know, but you can't expect that in India. So for me, going to the Kotla is a total experience where I go to Old Delhi first, I'll have some food, then I'll go to the Kotla, I'll watch a test match, winters in Delhi. So it's a package for me, right? And that's why I love it so much. Yeah. And then the Kotla has a fort as well attached to it, which has a lot of history with it. So yeah, that's why I love it so much. It's a very romantic and a very non-rational thing that I have. Yeah.
you mentioned food in Old Delhi, and I can sense that those who would be watching this show would be smacking their lips and thinking about all the great food that they've probably had in Chandni Chowk or any nearby place near Kotla. You're also quite fond of your own food. You
Yeah.
tend to keep trying. Just want to know from you: do you try out your theories more, or do you try out your dishes more, or do you try out the hypothesis of your articles more? Which of these things do you do more often?
I try my food more because theories are hard to come by and it's hard work, and it takes about a couple of years to publish one paper. So it's hard work right now for me in terms of theory. Food I try out a lot, and mainly that's driven by the fact that I can't get good food here. So when I'm missing butter chicken, I have to make it, and that's why I started making it, and that's why I keep trying it out. So food probably, yeah.
Yeah, the butter chicken that you get, even I'd say even outside of North India, is something that isn't really butter chicken because it's
Yeah.
sweet. So I can imagine how bad it might
Yeah.
be.
Yeah.
In
It's pretty bad.
India.
It's pretty bad.
It's
Indian restaurants in the US are like criminals. Yeah. Yeah.
now
They make bad butter chicken and they charge $15 for it. So yeah, so that's why I started making food here. And it's been good. Like I like having food, I like making food, and by the grace of the cooking gods, it's been good for me. I've been cooking okay. So yeah. And I'm a very harsh critic. So yeah.
But that I know. Now you said that theories, developing the theories take 2 years and probably even more sometimes. And anyone who's probably followed you on Twitter or probably, I'd say even Reddit, would know that you have this tendency to think out loud and, put out questions which even you don't know answers about, whether it be about how the ball is spinning, which direction might it spin, whether it be about reverse swing, or, something even like, how do you define consistency, or how do you define
Hmm.
batsman being consistent? So, does this curiosity come from, just following the game very closely, or, being a physicist where you have to think about a lot of scenarios and a lot of theories? Is the fact that sometimes your mind's probably even working in overdrive? Do you Is it also the case sometimes where you just tell yourself, oh, at the end of the day, it's just a game and I'm thinking too much? So I want to understand the process of your writing. uh, where does it come from? Because, I've said it before, sometimes when I read your articles, reading it the first time makes no sense to me. I have to read it again to make any sense of it.
I don't know if that's a compliment or a matlab kya hai. Yeah.
I'd say it's maybe, if I'm being a critic, what I can say is that probably you can tone down the language a little bit, but
Mm-hmm.
the fact that I have to read it twice shows that it's so much number heavy and so much data oriented that
Right.
the reader also has to put in the effort to, understand it, which I feel is a good thing, because a lot of times I think a lot of cricket writing has, shifted towards narratives, which I personally
Mm-hmm.
feel sometimes doesn't have a lot of cricketing sense. And I feel,
Right.
like I mentioned Jared, I think another person who can maintain this balance very well is Sid Monga. And for me, these
Right.
are
Right.
the two
Yeah.
writers
Yeah.
that I always look forward to reading, because I know that I'll
Yeah.
get a story and I'll get the data points.
Yeah.
So that is probably, one critic that I have of your writing. But overall, I want to
Right.
understand
Right.
the process and the theory. How do you come up with these theories, and how irritating or difficult can it be sometimes to not get the data or not get the hypothesis right for your
Right. Right. So it all begins with a cricketing question, right? So it has to start from there. As in physics, as in cricket, it has to start with some sort of question that you ask yourself. So a few months ago in the IPL, I wrote this article about
partnerships?
the number of balls you can attack and the number of balls you can defend. So the question for that came to me by watching these huge chases in Sharjah, where people were chasing down like 19 4 overs. And then I started thinking like a batter who's batting. Uh, and I started thinking in terms of sixes. So 19 4 overs, not 19 24 balls. It's can I hit 15 sixes in 24 balls? So it's a binary thing. So that started that research. So every article that I seek to write is like a research project. You start with a question, then you think of how you can mold that question into numbers. Can you build a sort of a model for it? Or can you look at some numbers for this to prove this or to disprove it? Then you run the code and you run the numbers and you watch them and you analyze them and then you write it. So it's completely like a research paper in my head. And that's how it goes. And it keeps coming because the more you watch, the more you think about it. And yeah, that's where it comes from.
So let's say that you finalize on the hypothesis and you finalize on the idea. How do you then get, the numbers and the data for something like that? Like, let's discuss about the article where where you were measuring consistency, where you
Right,
had you said that you have to group consistency. You have to take probably 25
right.
innings, if I'm not wrong. How do you get that data, and then how do you break it down in a way, it is making sense not only numerically but also in terms of cricketing sense, that why should the data or the you
Mhm.
know the cluster should be only 25 innings? Why should it not be 15, or why should it be
Mhm.
30 or 35? So how do
So
you
you have to make sure that you link it to the cricket, right? So this clustering article that you're talking about, the idea for this came from two sources. So firstly, I work in computational astrophysics. So there we do these clustering thingies. So our usual way of talking about consistency for batters is, did he score a high enough score frequently enough? So did he have a gap of more than 10 matches between good scores? Then he's not consistent. So this concept of consistency, this concept of it is very related to clusters as we define them in astrophysics. So I thought, why not use the two together? So that's how I started it. So the guiding principle has to be your cricketing knowledge, which is I'm looking to define a cluster by a phase in a batter's career where he's not taken more than 3 innings to score 50. Because that's how you think about it when you discuss it, right? So that has to be your guiding principle always, and you go from there. Yeah, and then you have to check if it makes cricketing sense, right? Because in physics, if I make a model tomorrow, I can test that model out somehow, right? By rolling a ball or doing something else. In cricket numbers, it's a bit tricky because the number you're making is, it's basically a construction, right? So that construction could be right or wrong, right? So you have to keep in check that this is making cricketing sense. For example, if I make a new measure of some sort and I call it the batting measure, and it tells me that Ishant Sharma is a better batsman than Sachin Tendulkar, that doesn't make any sense, right? So you have to be very careful about how your numbers tie into cricketing sense. So something like Basra, right? Basra is this new number that people use. It doesn't make any sense mathematically, right? And you can add up two numbers and you can get this final number, and it doesn't make any sense. So you can't use it.
Just just before you expand on the Basra, let me break it down for the viewers that Basra is the short form that people use to combine the batting average and the strike rate. And a lot of people tend to add the two and then make a conclusion of how good a batsman is in T20s. When if you go by basic maths or if you go by basic physics, you can't add two things which don't have the same units. You don't add
Right, exactly.
weight into length. You don't
Right,
add kgs into
exactly.
meters. So
Yeah.
that is something, and I think again Himanish is a good person to expand on it. So Himanish, why don't you expand on it and explain us what could be the deficiencies or what could be the shortcomings of something like the Basra?
Yeah, so something like the Basra is a very specific problem, right? Imagine that you drive a car, you have a car, and you've done 8,000 miles on the car, but your car's mileage is like 15 miles per liter, right? You cannot add these two numbers to make anything sensible. And that's what you're doing in Basra. Average is the runs per innings, and strike rate is the runs per 100 balls. So there's no sense in adding the two of them. And you can't make any sense of any batter's quality by adding the two of them.
Basically, you're saying that if you combine your car's speed and mileage, you will not get anything.
Right. They don't make any sense, right? So yeah, so you can make numbers up. These are all constructions. But A, those constructions have to make some sense, and B, you have to explain your numbers somehow. That yes, I'm getting these numbers. This is what this means. And you have to say that. You can't just arbitrarily yeah.
So this makes sense, and this is breaking down the numbers from breaking down the game from a numbers point of view. But what I've also seen you do is that you, because like you said, you are an physicist, you also study the movements of the ball. Keep you keep asking out loud that how will the ball spin if it's landing in a certain way, and how would it reverse swing or swing in a certain way if it's released in a certain manner. So anything that you've been thinking about, and I know you've written something on it, uh, which honestly was didn't make much sense to me because I had to put in a lot of effort and I couldn't at that point of time. But is there something on the ball that you would like to explain to the viewers? The spin thread that you did very recently on Twitter, it made some sense to me because again,
Right.
what helps me, and I think what helps me to understand some of the work that you do is because I have also done engineering. But why don't you break down, the very recent thread that you'd done on spin bowling, where you had mentioned how the ball takes a backspin and how the ball basically turns after pitching. Uh, why don't you explain that?
Yeah, so spin isn't very interesting in the sense that spin is basically just a reaction from the pitch. So if you look at the ball, see, this is the ball, and the ball is spinning this way. So if you're the batsman, the ball is spinning this way towards your leg side. The lower point of the ball is spinning in a certain way, and that'll hit the pitch, and the pitch will kick the ball in the opposite direction. and that's why you get turns. So that was what my thread was about. Sorry. The more interesting thing is drift and dip. So I'm currently writing an article about Ashwin, and I'm sort of trying to explain what drift and dip are. So drift and dip are basically shades of the same coin, sides of the same coin, in the sense that you can control the relative amount of drift and dip on your ball by changing how your seam is going. So if your seam goes completely forward, then you will only get dip. And that's how a top spinner is bowled. If your seam goes sideways like this, then you will get only drift. Now the skilled bowler, what he does or what she does is orient the seam in a direction between these two extremes. So your seam should ideally be pointing towards leg slip or leg gully, so on. In that sort of configuration, you will get both drift and dip. And that's what a bowler seeks to do. Yeah, so that's a very fascinating part of spin bowling that we know about, but we don't really cover too much in terms of physics. So yeah.
Of all the bowlers that you've seen, who do you think has had the best dip and who do you think has had the best drift?
I've not seen many bowlers, so I can't talk about this. But yeah, today we were watching the game, and Moeen Ali has very good dip, and that I guess depends on the number of reds you put on the ball and your seam as well. So because he's a classical off spinner, it's quite I'd like to say like optimized for good dip and drift. So yeah, I haven't watched many bowlers, but currently Lyon and Ali both have very good dip and drift. Because I'm writing on Ashwin, I'll talk about that for a bit. There is a certain area on the pitch to left-handers where other off spinners don't have very good numbers in terms of taking wickets. So the very full length on middle and leg stump. But Ashwin has very good numbers there exactly because he dips the ball and he gets people bowled out from that region. So that's something very fascinating about Ashwin that I'm sort of talking about nowadays in my work.
Let me break down it more simply. When you say that a bowler is getting more dip, what you're trying to say is that he's able to draw the batsman forward more than, say, another spinner. And when he's doing that, or when she's doing that, what the bowler has achieved is that he's made sure that the batsman has come forward and yet not reached to the pitch of the ball, right?
Right. So yeah. So not exactly that, but yeah. So simply put, as a batter, how you gauge length is by looking at the height of the ball. So if I'm a batter, I'll look at the height of the ball and I'll gauge length and I'll draw my foot out like that. Now with dip, what you accomplish is you'll be able to make your ball drop at the very last moment. So if I think in my head that the ball is going to land at the 5-meter mark and I draw my foot out there, the ball will land farther away and turn more from there, right? So that will catch my edge or beat me. Yeah. So that is the role of dip in, bowling.
Now, now that you mentioned that about Ashwin and you explained it, a few dismissals actually came into my mind where,
Yeah, so the Cook dismissal, dismissal was a classic example of that.
The Cook dismissal, he's dismissed Sangakkara also that way, I think, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, I think so.
There's been a couple of other dismissals that are coming into my mind where, early on in, I think it was in 2013 when Australia had toured India. In that series also, he got quite a few left-handers out that way, whether it be Matthew.
I think he got Warner out bowled also.
Warner out
once.
Philip
like that, yeah.
Matthew Wade. I think
he
brought that into place. So, yeah.
Yeah. So, beating players in the air is the name of the game when you're the spinner, because the pitch can or can't, be there for you, but the air is always there. And yeah.
But then if that is only spin bowling about, how do you explain the success of, spinners like Rashid Khan, spinners like Lami Chane, although albeit they might be successful in the shorter formats, but still,
Yeah, so the shorter format the shorter format has a different demand, right? In the shorter format, you don't need to construct wickets. In the longer format, what you do is that you have to play upon the fact that batting is a conditioned response. So what you do is you condition the batter to play a certain way, and then you throw in a variation of flight or pace or dip or whatever. But in the shorter formats, your demands are different. In the shorter formats, if you bowl quick spin, you are going to be successful because it's physically impossible to hit that if you land it well. So that is a different domain altogether. Yeah. This is only about test match bowling, like long format bowling.
Have you also studied someone like Graeme Swann or no?
So there's not enough tracking data on Graeme Swann in the public domain. So he is there in the database, but there's not many balls of his. So so it doesn't make sense to study him from a line and neck perspective that way. So I haven't.
Now, how much time does it take you to write, an article like this, whether it be the cluster article or the one? I think the IPL one you must have still completed it in some time, because that data was quite relatively easily available. But how much time does it take you to come up with these cluster kind of an article or the partnerships article that you did?
Right. So nowadays it takes a lot of time because I'm sometimes unable to even work on the weekends because I'm working on my research on the weekends. So in terms of the mental space I'm giving cricket right now, it's at a minimal. So but summing the time I take right from the conception of the idea to maybe writing it, maybe 4 or 5 days in total. Like if I sat down to write an article, it would take me 4 or 5 days, right from thinking of it to maybe writing code and then analyzing numbers, making the plots, writing it. So 4 or 5 days to about 2 weeks sounds okay, right? But it's very punctuated now because I have a lot of other work. So I can barely watch any cricket. So
Is it frustrating when you're not able to give time? And so the reason why I'm asking you this is because for a lot of us who are enthusiasts or fans, I don't tend to use the word experts because I feel that once you use the word experts, then you become full-time into it. But for a lot of us enthusiasts, cricket is a break from reality. It's a way to be entertained. It's a way to to keep your mind fresh. But for someone like you who really works hard into developing an article or developing a theory, can it get frustrating? Like, can there sometimes be too much of cricket around you? Because I don't do it full time, but sometimes I've found myself in a situation where now that because I tend to watch the game much more closely. Sometimes that I also have a cricket fatigue. I don't want to watch cricket.
Right.
In India game. Because I've reached a stage where it's very difficult for me to watch a game without looking at just the scorecard.
Right. I completely get you, and it gets tiring sometimes because you constantly keep thinking, and you keep thinking in terms of questions, and sometimes you don't have the data for that. Sometimes you don't have the time to go after those questions, and it can get tiring. And sometimes I do wish I go back to that time where I used to watch cricket for fun, which I rarely do anymore. But it is quite frustrating. But thankfully, I don't need to produce work. So my contribution to Cricinfo is once in 2 months. So I don't force myself to ask questions that much now. When I have them, I'll write about them. So in that sense, I'm very comfortable. But yes, it does get tiring at some points because you keep thinking about it, and you can't have fun with it. You can't just watch it like casually. Once that thing is on, it's on. So
it's like it becomes an instinct, like how it becomes for batters when they are playing. There are some shots and some movements which are just out of instinct. You don't plan it, which is why I feel that now that I have also I like I said, I am still an enthusiast, so I don't dig up the game whenever I see with numbers. But I just try and understand different techniques or the strategy part of it, and about it. So for me also, it's sometimes like you need to be fully involved. Sometimes I feel that
Right.
just watching a game can be very tiring, especially if you
Right. It is
watching from the
completely.
ball one
Yeah.
till the end of the game. So
Right. Completely.
so I got my answer. I wanted to know if it can be frustrating because
Yeah, it's very frustrating at
I'm
points in
sure
time. Yeah.
you know Karthik Krishnaswamy as well of
Yeah.
Cricket
Yeah.
Show. So
Yeah.
once
I
I
know.
was talking to him, and
Yeah.
he said that after the whole euphoria of GABA,
Mm.
he said that it might sound funny, but yeah, I really don't want to read anything more about GABA because I was
Yeah, I
commentating.
can completely imagine, because if you have to do it as a job and you
Yeah,
have to keep writing about it and thinking about it, it can get very tiring.
because
Yeah,
he was
I can
of the
completely
opinion
imagine.
that I was doing commentating while when I would wake up at 5 in the morning, and
Yeah.
then I'd produce
Yeah.
an article. I'll have some of my own thinking and some articles, etc., etc. So he said that when you've literally lived every ball of that game and the series, it
Right.
becomes difficult
Right.
to read someone else's work or article on the
Yeah.
same. So I wanted to get that from
Yeah. And this is one of the things which I think about when I think of a career in cricket writing, right? I love to write. I love numbers. I love cricket. But doing it as a career might just kill the love off, which I've heard from a lot of jaded people. So yeah, that's definitely a consideration. Like, I can't do it full time. I can't. I have to switch off and do something else. Like, yeah.
Yeah, which
Yeah.
is why I feel like someone like a Jared is definitely a legend because I asked him this. He said that I try too many things because I get bored. I get bored.
Right.
So
Right.
when I get
Yeah.
bored of writing, I start making videos. When I get bored of
Right.
making videos, I do a podcast. When I get bored of that, I do a Twitter space. And he said that uh, some people call me a cricket savant, but I think the work that I do, I can do it for any other sport as well. He said I could do it
Yeah.
for basketball. I was like, man,
He's amazing that way.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You
So,
have to have that passion as well, right? So
do
yeah.
you also follow any other sport, with
I
half
don't.
passion or half as interest?
I don't. I don't. Yeah. I mean, so the thing is that when I was doing my master's and when I was getting into my PhD and before that as well, I didn't have time for any other thing in my life. So cricket was the only thing I had from before and just kind of stuck. Yeah. Yeah. I don't think I have the mental space to follow something else right now. I don't even watch things. I don't watch series. So like I just don't have the mental space to follow things right now. Yeah. So that's why, like, cricket was always there and it stuck with me. So that's it. Yeah.
You mentioned that there isn't enough mental space, and I can understand because it can get very tiring, and it sort of takes me back to since both of us also come from a similar background of the time where you must have prepared for your engineering exams and JE.
Right.
uh,
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
I have felt that I want to know this from you, that how much do you think that 4 years of Bits Pilani and 2 years before, how much would that have shaped in terms of ensuring that you're able to put in that long hours in your writing? Because what I feel is that once you've been put in
Mm.
through that grind of 2 years of coaching, then 4 years
Yeah.
of 4 years of engineering,
Right.
uh,
Right.
the one thing that you can do at the drop of a hat, especially for the first 5 to 10 years of your career, is that you're able to slog. You can slog, and
Yeah. I'm not able to slog. I've grown completely tired of like slogging. I can't slog anymore, which is a big problem in my research as well. But I don't know. I don't know if it has an effect on my writing, because I used to like writing long stuff before that as well. So I don't know how much that influenced it. And engineering college, you don't slog at all, right? You just slack off for 4 years. So that was my like 4 years in engineering college where I did nothing at all. So I don't know what effect that had on this thing at all.
because I was coming from a point of view where just before the exams you're not even sleeping and just studying, becoming a
Yeah,
zombie, etc. So I was coming from
yeah,
that point of view. Maybe you've been,
yeah.
you must have been intelligent that you didn't need to slog.
I didn't get very good marks in bits anyway. So yeah, I wasn't very into studying engineering at all. I used to do my physics projects on the side. So yeah, I wasn't much into studying. I didn't slog much in bits at all. JEE preparation I have slogged, but clearly not enough. But yeah, but I don't think that has an impact on the writing anyway. Yeah.
Now, we've discussed your writing, we've discussed your love for cooking, we've discussed your love for Delhi, we've discussed a few things. Uh, want to bring the attention back to cricket. You seem to be someone who's in love with Pujara. I think more than Pujara, I think you are loving with the idea of how he probably constructs an innings, or probably he, has that initial struggle. What is it about Pujara that you find him fascinating so much or like it so much? Because I Pujara is one cricketer I've seen you tweet when he gets out, being so disappointed. I have not seen that for any other cricketer from your side, not even a bowler. So, what is it about
So
Pujara?
I don't have many emotional connections with much in cricket now. I did have an emotional connection with CSK for a long time. Now I think when Dhoni retires, it'll go away. I did have one with Vijay. He's now like not there. So Pujara is the only other person that I watched from 2013 when he started, 12 when he started. So that's why I have this sort of association with him, and I look out for him, and I kind of want him to do well. And when he went on his first overseas tour in 14-15, there were a lot of people criticizing him.
I have to correct you.
Yeah.
His first overseas tour was not 14-15.
Yeah, so that was 13, but his first cycle was 14-15
No,
when he
his
went to
first.
Australia and England.
You're still wrong. His first overseas tour was 2010, South Africa. He
Was
played
it
that
10 or 13?
10. He played that test match in Durban that India won when Harbhajan Singh took those four wickets in the first innings. He
So the
played
70 and 153 was in 13.
No, so there was this series in 2010 where India had lost the test match in Centurion. Pujara had played the second test match in Durban. The third test match was a draw because he played that second test match because I think VVS Lakshman or one of the players was injured. I
Okay.
don't remember who.
Okay.
Dale Steyn had bowled a Jaffa because Pujara made his debut in 2010 versus Australia. So
Right.
he did go to South Africa in 2010. So that was not exactly
Right.
a tour. He played one test match though. No, two.
Right.
He played the Cape Town test match as well. So he played both the test matches. India, I think he was batting number 6 in that series.
Right. So Cape Town in 2011. Yeah. So
Yeah,
one match there. Yeah. Yeah.
Cape Town. I think he played in Durban as well, if I'm not wrong.
No, just Cape Town. Oh no, sorry. Yeah. Durban as well. Yeah.
He didn't play in Centurion. He played in Durban as well. I'm not sure who got. Murli Vijay also was a part of it because Gautam Gambhir didn't play the second test. He had concussion, if I'm not wrong. So Murli Vijay had opened with Sehwag in the second test match in Durban, which India won. And then in the third test match, Gautam Gambhir made a comeback. So, yeah, I may not be as technically sound,
I don't remember things.
but I
So
remember.
anyway, so I wrote this long post sort of analyzing his dismissals, trying to prove that there was no one pattern to them. And since then, I've just been like his fan. My wallpaper is Pujara currently, and he's just a very unique player. I won't go into the cliches of he's a classic test batsman and so on. It's nothing like that. I just liked him from when I started watching cricket properly, like in the early 2010s. So yeah.
Yeah, I just recently you had tweeted, when the Lords Test was happening that in 2018 in Lords when Murli Vijay got out to Anderson both times, it probably ended his career, and then it might end Pujara's career, but it wasn't to be because he's played a very good innings in the next Test match as well. So
Right.
that might not happen, but again, you said that you're not emotionally attached to a lot of cricketers right now, which is something that has happened with me as well. Is it because we are now aging, or is it something else where
I
what do
think I think Ram Goha likes to quote this Jack Fingleton quote, I think it is, which says that the more cricket I watch, the less chauvinistic I become, or something like that. So I think as you start appreciating the beauty of the game a little more, it becomes less about your own tribalism and more about watching the game and loving the game. Ultimately, it's just a game, right? And you like watching. So I think when you start as a fan, you start as an India fan. But that sort of peters out as you start loving the game and you watch it for the game as you go on. So I think that's a natural progression of a fan who watches the game deeply. Yeah.
For me, it's been a case, and it's happened across sports now that when I was growing up, a lot of sports persons, and I could name actually 10 or 11 of them at that point of time, who I felt were my heroes. Like I actually wanted to be them. But now that I've grown up, I've started to understand the things in life a lot more than what I used to do. And so now that connect has gone, because I just look at them as a player whose game I can study, whose game when I study them I can learn more about the game. But that is that. I don't get
Right.
emotionally
Right.
attached myself.
Right.
It's not
So
something that
we tend to watch sport as drama. And in watching sport as drama, we sort of elevate these players to heroes. And then we have a hard time dissociating that status of a hero on the field and off the field. And that's what the issue is primarily. And as you mature, you understand that the person off the field is not the player on the field. And you've got to dissociate the two as much as you can. So Sachin is probably the greatest batsman ever, but he might not be a very good person off the field, or he might be something else. So you've got to not look up to them as heroes in life. They might be, which is good if that happens, but you've got to sort of dissociate these two things in your head as you go along.
Also, I want to understand this from you. I have asked this to a couple of other writers as well. Uh, is it important, for someone who has to study the game from an analytical point of view, to detach themselves from a player or an emotion, or do you think it adds to the work that you do? Can it make you biased or no?
So it depends. If I'm writing an analysis piece, right, I need to be fair and I need to be focused on the numbers only. Now, if my numbers tell me that Pujara is the 10th on this list and not the first, I can't meddle with the numbers to change that, right? I have to report it as is. Now, if I'm writing some sort of an ode to Pujara and gushing about him or gushing about Dhoni, then it's a little different. But then that's a different genre of writing completely. So yeah, so when you write something which you're reporting, or when you try to analyze the game, you've got to be neutral about it. And you've got to try to be neutral about it. Yeah. Sometimes it's hard, but yeah.
Well, I think we've had quite a few deep conversations now, with the last one being on Pujara, and how we need to probably not look at players as heroes off the field, but and only look at them as players who are there on the field. Now I'd move on to something a little light and casual. Uh, I don't want to call it rapid fire, but it is something like that, where I just ask you about a few of your favorites. So if you were to pick one, if you had to pick your favorite batsman, who would it be? Or one batsman who you'd never get bored of watching.
Probably De Villiers. But yeah, I have to think a bit more about that. No, I have to change that to Vijay actually. So Vijay is my first irrational love in cricket. So Vijay, yeah.
And who do you think is the most complete batsman that you've come across?
Complete De Villiers. I mean, Tendulkar is very close, but I haven't watched enough of him. De Villiers is he's just beyond description. The kind of versatility he has and the kind of sheer skill he has is just not comparable to anyone else. Yeah, he can play 33 of 297. He can play 131 of 30. He can do the same within 5 days. So yeah, the most complete I'd say is De Villiers. Yeah.
this is where, because I have watched De Villiers more than what I have watched Tendulkar, and more importantly, I feel that because I started watching in 2003, 2004, I haven't watched Tendulkar speak. And when
Right,
it comes
same.
to that, is
Yeah,
why when I have to talk about De Villiers being the most complete batsman, I have a lot more conviction. But from
right,
what I've read and what I've still watched him, probably when he was 38, 37, and 39, and still bat the way he was doing, it told me
right.
that what he would have been at his peak. So for me, when it has
No,
to
so yeah, yeah.
when I have to pick one between De Villiers and Tendulkar, I can never make that distinction. So for me, it's a joint.
Yeah,
As
so
who
the thing about Tendulkar is that he has longevity more than De Villiers, but De Villiers played more formats more. But in terms of numbers, Tendulkar was a revolutionary. Like you can't average 57 after like 170 test matches. So he was a complete freak in those terms. But in terms of pure ability and completeness, I think De Villiers just beats him. But yeah, like you said, we haven't watched enough Tendulkar in his prime, so maybe like
for me,
we
it's
can't
a
make a
for
judgment
me
call
it's
on
a
that.
tie because I think
Yeah,
you know
very close. Yeah,
longevity is also a skill. It's difficult to
right.
put that longevity in exact numbers. So for me, it remains Tendulkar and De Villiers
Right,
in terms of the most complete batsman that I have come across. Uh,
right. True, true. Hard
favorite
to pick
bowler,
between the two.
favorite bowler, pacer.
Favorite bowler, pacer, Wasim Akram.
And would the answer be same if I ask you one fast bowler that you would like to watch a lot, or one fast bowler you would say is the most complete fast bowler?
Complete fast bowler. I haven't watched a lot of Dale Steyn, but Dale Steyn would probably be there. Uh, because Anderson is someone who swings the ball a lot, but Dale Steyn was sort of uh, penetrative in all conditions. So yeah, complete bowler Dale Steyn, definitely. Yeah. In terms of spinners, currently it's Ashwin, but you've got to watch Vaughan. You've got to watch Shane Vaughan. Like you feel a tension in the pit of your stomach for the batter when you watch Vaughan. Because every ball of his has to do something. Like it's a complete mystery and it's a complete story in the air and off the pitch. So yeah. Vaughan is that artist bowler for me, which I like watching.
Favorite format?
Test match. No
Nothing.
doubt about that.
Nothing.
No doubt about it. No thinking. Yeah.
If you had to pick the five best cricket matches that you've watched, irrespective of the format, which all would they be? Five matches.
This is
Which
very hard because I don't remember cricket very well. So
No, then it becomes
so
easy because
the
if you don't remember cricket very well, so the ones that you'll remember would be the ones that you would like to.
right. So the first test match I watched at the ground, which was India versus South Africa 2015 in Delhi, which had this amazing blockathon by AB and Amla on the final day, and India won that finally. So that then the Gabba win, because I remember. So in my time zone, it was I think 12 o'clock when the last session started, and my semester was going to begin, and I would have no time to watch Test cricket after that. And I made the decision to not sleep and watch, and I was so happy after we won. So that one. Then the Lord's match from last week. Obviously, there's a lot of recency bias because I don't remember anything. So, so that then the quarterfinal against Australia in Mohali in the 2016 World Cup. Because I was watching that with one of my best friends at home, and that was a special match. So these are four, right? And then the World Cup final, because Dhoni is the other person with whom I had a thing. So I followed Dhoni since his days in Kenya. So when he went to Kenya as part of India A, and he scored a couple of centuries, I followed him since then. So that sort of performance on that stage in a World Cup final was a sort of culmination for me. That Dhoni is now definitely sealed as a legend. So for the fan in me, for the child in me, that night and that six was the most memorable. I was studying for JEE at that time. I still remember I was mugging up the formula for Calgon, which I don't remember now. But yeah, I was trying to study, and yeah, Yeah. So these five.
I don't even remember that. Which subject is this from? I really can't remember.
Inorganic chemistry.
Yeah.
This is chemistry. Yeah.
And this comes from someone who scored 99 in chemistry in 12th boards.
You all forgotten everything. It's okay. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, just because you've mentioned that Dhoni is one player that you really had a connection with. Did the hairstyle had to do anything with it, or was it completely your call?
No, the hairstyle is just locked down. Plus, I'm very lazy, and I just like my hair like this. So yeah. I never had long hair before. So lockdown was the first time I have long hair.
Because Bharat Sundaresan was on the show, and he's also mentioned in his book. He said that I had my long hair before.
I've read that. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. Oh, this is just lockdown stuff. Yeah.
I think once you've mentioned those 5 games, there isn't much to discuss anymore. It's always go back on a lot of memories. For me, one very special game will always be the 2007 World T20 final, because that was the first time I saw India win a trophy.
Right.
And,
right.
Gabba is.
Right.
I've not watched the 2002 NatWest Trophy or the 2001 Kolkata Test match, and I find it as a great misfortune of mine because I was too young at that time.
Yeah. Same.
But if I think from whatever I've read, if there was an amalgamation of those 2 games, it had to be Gabba. So yeah, that is one real great test match. And I think it remains the best test victory I've seen. Because I know people. I don't rate Lords as high as a few other test wins. Like there's Johannesburg 2018. There's also Mohali 2010. There's also Bangalore 2017. Because I think we were the superior team also going into Lords. It's just that we didn't expect that it would come.
Come the final day, we didn't expect to win. So yeah. But Gabba was a combination of many things, because there was also the context surrounding the game. Where we had our C team or a D team playing. And then just the way they chased 350, 360, whatever on the final day.
329.
Yeah. So that was just completely unexpected, and just an amazing moment overall.
When it comes to Gabba, I've always been saying this, and I've repeated it a few times, that if there was an all-time India 11 that was playing that test match, even that team would have lost and not been able to chase.
Yeah. I mean, it could very well be a statistical fluke, which it probably was. Chasing down 320 on the final day is pretty unlikely. It happened. Yeah.
It's not just about chasing 320. It's about look at the bowling attack that India had.
11, that too. Yeah, obviously.
11 test wickets between Siraj, Saini,
Right.
Rajan, Sundar, and Shardul. And India lost Saini on day 1. Saini didn't bowl enough
in
the second innings, and losing the toss, and then Australia looked certain to reach 400. How they didn't reach 400 is another.
Yeah.
So that game has had too many anomalies for it to make.
It
doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Whichever way you look at it. So for me, I think it will remain one of the most special wins.
Yeah, definitely. There's also the added context of Smith and Warner being there this time, because the narrative around the previous win was that Warner and Smith weren't there. So this time they had them, and still, he got to win. So yeah, pretty special.
So I think there's nothing more to talk about really. Once you've talked about Gabba, I don't think there's anything that you can talk about which will top it, or make any more sense. So on this note, I'd like to end this show, and I'd like to thank you for coming on the show. And hopefully, the blockage that you sometimes talk about, the writer's block, isn't there anymore. And just one suggestion, like I said, early on in the show, that you have to tone down your writing. because the average viewer, you have to understand, is more interested with what is shown to them on a Star or a show, where
Right.
Analysis sometimes isn't there. It's more about living in the
Right.
nostalgia. So that is the
Right.
only feedback.
So that's a constant struggle, no? Like how do you find ways to describe the game better, but also like write about them well enough for people to understand and people to appreciate and start using them later on. So that's always the challenge for people like me, right? So yeah, constantly trying to improve on that front.
Well, I hope it only gets better and you get more readers who
Thank you.
start understanding your work and appreciating your work, and hopefully, this when you become a big writer, people remember this interview and come back to it. Yeah, well,
Nobody's becoming a big writer. That's okay. Yeah.
well, it's been one great conversation with you, like I expected.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Likewise.
Yeah, I'd just like to say, if you want to know about, good music, or want to know about apart from cricket, because you'll find Imanish's work on Cricinfo anyway. But the other stuff that he does about, be it about his, cooking or singing or the music, it's something that you can see on his Twitter. So do follow him, and if you like this episode, do share it with your friends. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the YouTube channel. So yeah, that's about it. And if you like this, there's also a playlist in the description which you can watch, where you have all the other episodes of Gupshup with Gil, all of them quite different and varied from each other. So do watch it. That's all. That's it from today. Thank you.